Welcome to Science Cafe, New Hampshire in Concord. My name is David Brooks. I write for the Concord Monitor and at granitegeek.org, and I have been part of Science Cafe, New Hampshire since it started about 7 years ago. It was co-founded by that guy over there with a microphone, Dan Marchek. He and Sarah Eck, who lives up in Hopkinton, decided this would be a cool thing to have, and so they started it, and they asked me to join, and I thought it was an awesome idea that would last 6 months and fizzle out. And that was 2011. So my prognostication powers are not very good. But we have been here in Concord for 2.5 years, been down in Nashua the whole time, pretty much, and there is another Science Cafe that has started in Manchester that's done by Sea Science Center. It's not directly by us, but it goes every month. And there is one that's out in Portsmouth now that's done, it's in the Portsmouth Brewery. It's done by a group called Gundalo, which is sort of an environmental group. And that one is going, so we have 4 monthly ones in the state, so we are by far the highest per capita Science Cafe state in the country. And I think Dan and Sarah's work is really why that's happened. A couple things about how it works. First of all, as you will see, this is a difficult venue for the wait staff because we're so crowded. We all come at the same time. We all leave at the same time. So tip generously. They give us a room for free, so we want them to be happy. Let's see, Science Cafe happens every month here in Concord, and on the third Tuesday, next month's topic is going to be about alternative voting methods, things like instant runoff, if you're familiar with things like that. There's been a couple of bills in the state trying to institute them that just died, and in Maine there's a big legal fight over whether they're going to do it there. We're going to talk about how it works and why it might or may not be a good idea. Nashua's next topic is smart buildings. Smart buildings. That's down at the Riverwalk right downtown, which is a very cool, funky little bar. And so sciencecafenh.org is our website. So check it out. And if you have not already, there is a sign-up sheet there to be part of the Granite Geek and the Science Cafe newsletters. So I'll send you an email once a week about Granite Geek stuff. And I will send you, you'll get, both of us will get notifications about Science Cafes coming up, so you won't forget. Is there anything else I'm supposed to talk about? You think I'd know by now. I guess that's it. Okay, our topic tonight, as you know, is building efficiency, energy efficiency mostly. Pretty much entirely, I suspect, buildings from small to large. Oh, actually, there is one thing I keep forgetting. I always forget to do this. How many of you have not been to a Science Cafe before? Please raise your hand. Whoa, excellent. All right, good. All right. And how many of you, all right, as long as I'm doing this, my boss is gone, but I'm going to ask this anyway. How many of you subscribe to the Concord Monitor? Please raise your hand. Well, that's not bad. There is a low-cost subscription form there for the rest of you laggards and dullards. If you'd like to, join the cool kids, you can do it. All right. Okay. Anyway, back to the topic at hand today. So we're talking about building efficiency. I had a column today where I talked about how everybody likes to talk about solar panels because they're wicked cool and wind farms and all that stuff, but nobody likes to talk about efficiency, which is actually at least as important, shall we say, in terms of making ourselves efficient and trying to save the planet before it falls off a cliff, which it's in the process of doing. But anyway, so our panelists are 4, as you see, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves very quickly and tell us why we should pay any attention to them, basically give us their quick expertise, and then I will ask the first question, and after that, it's up to you guys. Raise your hand. Is it just like school? Wait for somebody to bring the microphone because this is being filmed by Concord Cable Television, the local cable access, and it will be online as well as shown on the TV. You can actually see old ones, previous Science Cafe Concords if you want to. So make sure you smile, comb your hair, raise your hand, wait for the microphone before you ask your question. Okay, so the panelists, I guess I'll start with you since you're closest. Please tell us why we should pay any attention to you. Oh, and when we come to you with a microphone, hold it a little bit closer to your mouth than you think you should, but not too close or your P's will be very explosive.
Hello, I'm Paul Levier from Resilient Buildings Group, which is an organization here in Concord. We do high-performance building consulting work and construction management focused on energy-centric projects. For them, I do high-performance building consulting work. Oftentimes, that means that somebody is looking for a particular green building certification, so that's a part of our work. And we also do energy auditing, building commissioning work, and net zero energy projects. That's kind of my favorite. Those are kind of my favorite projects, the net zero energy projects. We recently added Passive House, and we can talk about Passive House in a little bit too, to our repertoire. So glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm Margaret Dillon, and I'm an independent and private energy and building consultant. I do pretty much what he does, just less of it, because I'm just one person. But I do consulting on any building under 100,000 square feet, no matter what it's used for, and basically assess it for improving the performance, make it more comfortable, more durable, and all for less energy. So I've been doing this for about 11 years. For 10 years before that, I was managing buildings, property management, and running an affordable housing organization, so worked with a lot of older buildings and worked with every trade in the business, from designers, engineers, architects, and all the trades, and was really impressed at how every trade dealt with each individual component of the building very separately. And so I could raise money for this nonprofit and put literally millions of dollars into these buildings. And they worked a little better, but never really performed as well as I thought they should. So I stopped doing that and focused on making buildings perform better.
Hi, my name's Kate Peters. I work at Eversource for our energy efficiency programs. And we work on a set of programs, you may have heard of them. They go under the name NH Saves. So it's a set of rebate programs for energy efficiency improvements in the state. We work with all the other utilities in the state to provide these programs. Here in Concord, many of you may have Unitil. They also provide similar programs. So I spend most of my time on program planning type of activities. I do also have a building auditor certification, but I am not spending all day in buildings the way that Margaret and Paul are, so they're probably more technically expert, but I'd be glad to talk with you if people have questions about programs, about rebates, about how the state's efficiency programs can help you do projects.
Hi, I'm Kristen Bonney with TRC Energy Services. We're a large nationwide firm that has several different aspects to it. Mine is energy services. We also have an environmental group, and then we have an infrastructure group that ranges from doing things to permitting pipelines and that kind of stuff. But I work on energy efficiency only and focus on multifamily and commercial buildings. We are program implementers for state governments that have energy efficiency money that needs to be spent in a certain sector or type of building. So I'm kind of on the top level compared to everybody else that's here. I'm working mostly on efficiency programs, so I'm not in the buildings either, but we do have an overarching view of how the whole process works.
Okay, well, I will start, as I said, with the first question, and it's going to be a fairly basic one. It occurred to me, I was writing my column, I was talking about insulation, insulation is boring, and then insulation is important, and then I don't really know how insulation works. It's like this magic stuff you put in your attic. So I thought I would start with a semi-technical question, is how does insulation work? And I mentioned these guys, and they all pointed it to you, so you get to answer it. So, Mark. So how does insulation work?
So the short answer is insulation slows heat transfer. It slows heat transfer, conductive heat transfer. The longer answer, which you're going to get a little bit, is if you all grab many of you have beer glasses, grab your beer glasses, and it feels cold, right? So your body temperature heat is whatever it is, 85, 90 degrees, the skin temperature, and it's transferring through to that cold surface to that colder material inside, through the colder temperatures inside, through the glass. So every property, every material has certain properties, and one of the properties is its conductivity or its resistance to heat transfer. So that depends on the conductivity of the material, the thickness of that material, and there are other things that determine how fast the heat transfers. So insulation is a material, or one of many materials, that slows heat transfer in very different ways. So fiberglass and spray foam and cellulose and rock wool and all the other different kinds of rigid foam boards, they all are different. They all may be called insulation, but they have a different relationship to how heat transfers through them or how quickly. And I wanted to mention that because I was listening to the radio program today, and you talked about insulation and adding insulation to a building. This only deals with conductive heat transfer, where there's actually contact, physical contact. Insulation stops conduction or slows conduction. But heat transfers in other ways, especially through air as well. And so without an air barrier, so if I had imagine this now, your glass of beer is a hot cup of coffee. You can grab that cup of coffee. Your hand's going to get a lot hotter if you're grabbing glass as it will through a ceramic mug with a thicker ceramic, because ceramic conducts heat less quickly than through glass. If it's an insulated mug with an airspace in the middle, you wouldn't even feel the warmth of that hot liquid at all, right? But if you put your hand on top of a hot steaming cup of water, vapor is going to come up, and that's called a convective heat transfer, where actually the heat is moving through air. So for insulation to work, to slow the heat transfer, to lower your energy bills, to make you more comfortable, it needs to be in contact with an air barrier, because that's the other form of heat transfer. That make sense? That's one of the other forms. So if you hire somebody to insulate their attic and they go in and blow a whole bunch of stuff into your top of your ceiling, for instance, in your attic, and they blow a low density material and it's not in contact with an air barrier, you still may have icicles, ice dams, and heat loss into that attic because it's not in contact with an air barrier. And yet it's a messy job, it's more expensive, it's labor intensive, so sometimes it doesn't happen. But as I go into these buildings that you can see generations on top, we all have seen this, where there's a 100-year-old building will have squirrel nuts and corn cobs, and then some other blown-in materials, and then maybe a layer of fiberglass, and then some more blown-in, sort of an archaeological dig through different materials. If there wasn't really an air barrier, heat transfer was going to happen through the sides of the framing, through that material. There'll be what's called a thermal bypass. So when you talk about efficiency and adding insulation, it's really important to consider the necessity of an air barrier as well.
So on a more broad note, for other folks who have homes and are thinking about their insulation levels after this conversation and after tonight, the programs that I mentioned, NH Saves, does offer energy audits and rebates to help you install insulation and do air sealing and that sort of work in your home. So the way that works is the home does have to qualify for the rebate programs. They're focused on kind of high-use homes. You go to nhsaves.com and you put in the square footage of your house and the amount of heating fuel that you used in the past year, and it will do a little calculation and tell you if your home qualifies for the rebate program based on the energy use per square foot. And you can then sign up for the program through your utility. You'll get an energy audit for $100. If you move forward with any of the work that's recommended through that audit, your $100 gets put towards the cost of your work. And there are rebates available at 50% of the cost up to $4,000 to put towards projects. So this is one of the things that we do through these programs that's meant to help people actually implement projects to reduce their energy use in homes. So if that's something that's interesting to you, definitely check out that NH Save site. And all of the contractors and auditors that work with that program have to meet a certain set of qualifications. They have to be certified. We do quality assurance, and there's a whole list of them that are qualified to work through the program. So it's a really good option for folks who are interested, even in just finding out more about what your options are for your home and how your house is working, to get that audit for a fairly low cost. And then if there's work that you want to do, move forward with it.
And there are other places to get energy audits, right? I mean,
Yes.
lots of firms do it, and lots of, okay. Just
Yep.
look in the yellow pages or whatever the online equivalent is.
The Residential Energy Providers Association happened to have their meeting here earlier. There are some of them in the back. They keep a list of qualified contractors. This is for residential that I'm talking about. So there are definitely options.
And
Okay,
I'll
no,
come to you.
David, I got one here in
Okay,
front.
okay, go.
Yes, hi. Thank you all very much for coming and doing this. I have a question for the building scientists up there. We have an awful lot of existing buildings. I mean, it's easier to do a high-performance building if it's new, but we have an awful lot of existing buildings that are out there that are just consuming energy and maybe unhealthy to live in. So my question is, and I understand this is a difficult question because a lot of variables could be in it. But let's just say you have an existing building, an old cape with clapboard siding and 2x4 construction and not a lot of insulation. And you want to go for a high-performance type of a convert on this. I tend to design buildings with remote insulation, continuous on the outside. I like that, okay. But that's not always economically feasible. If the siding is going to be all replaced and then painted, you're looking at a big cost. I'm just wondering, another option would be to put foam on the inside. Just from a general standpoint, what are your feelings on remote insulation as a rehab strategy versus putting insulation on the inside continuous and strapping over that for a rehab, for an existing building situation? Keeping in mind that it's a lot harder to manage the moisture on an inside application as opposed to just keeping the sheathing warm. I know it's a big question, but...
Great question. Yeah, you take it.
All right. You're asking an excellent question because, as you say, there are thousands and thousands of existing buildings already here. And if we were to solve that dilemma, if we were to work really diligently on the existing buildings, we could solve climate change to a very large extent. In New Hampshire, I think it's something like over 50%, 59% or so of our energy goes into our buildings.
Okay, sorry, we're going.
So solve that, and you've solved, much of the environmental ills that go along with it. In general, I would favor what you're describing, which is insulating the building from the outside. We're big fans of what we call deep energy retrofits, and that's essentially typically taking the siding off of the building, especially if the siding needs to be replaced anyways. That's a perfect opportunity. Nobody should take the siding off of a building and re-side the building without doing something to the insulated shell. And so that's a perfect opportunity. If you're replacing the siding anyways, do something to the exterior, some kind of continuous insulation. The advantage that has, as Margaret's describing, is it keeps your structure, the thing that holds your building up, warm and dry. Keep the insulation to the outside and your building is warm and dry, and you've solved much of the durability issue. There are some people who are going around doing what they call chainsaw retrofits, which is literally climbing up onto the roof and taking a chainsaw and cutting the eave off of the building and then wrapping the building's walls with foam or some kind of insulation, and then putting the insulation up on top of the roof as well, and then building a new roof over that, and then putting new eaves over that might be even deeper or thicker, so that you're pushing the rainwater further away from the building. You're solving several things at the same time. So I would say that's a great strategy.
I think I'm understanding why the trade schools have so many classes now instead of just teaching you to use a hammer. So, actually, Mr. Kristen, can I ask you actually about, because I'm interested also, obviously you're talking about houses here, but commercial and industrial buildings are, and when you talk about the climate issue, are, I think, a big part of it. Do you deal with commercial and industrial buildings, customers that come to you and want to know what to do swap out the light bulbs or?
We do, and commercial buildings are a little bit of a different animal because you are looking at how all of the systems in the building interact with each other. So similar to what they were saying is that all the systems play off of each other, but in a commercial building, especially manufacturing spaces with huge, wide open spaces with a lot of air that needs to be heated and cooled, you want to make sure that you are installing systems that interact well together and are commissioned properly to be able to work the way they're intended. So, and multifamily buildings tend to be the same. So when you're working with a much bigger space, it's important for an auditor to go in and look at all of the systems in the building, and then we work with specific software, and you input all of the different pieces into this software, and then it helps us come up with a plan for that building to make it more energy efficient. So like you noted in your article this morning, I believe, was that Lint in Stratham is doing a massive energy efficiency overhaul. And so that means that they are going to go, top to bottom in their building and install all the different systems that interact with each other, and they play off of each other. So you can't have a really efficient heating system without doing the insulation work that they talked about. You can't have, brand new lighting that is not like the best that you can get in order to be saving the correct amount of energy to make the amount of money that you put into that cost effective. So we also have tools that you once you put in the measures that you're going to be doing in a commercial multifamily building, you put in how much it's going to cost, and then it lets you know how quickly you're going to be paid back for that work by the energy savings that project creates. And we look for the calculations are fairly complicated, but we look for projects that pay back very quickly. So that makes it cost effective, and that's how states can spend their money on the multifamily and commercial sector.
Is there a change that most commonly will be paid back quickly? In other words, swapping out the light bulbs is your classic example.
Lighting is the fastest payback. But a lot of commercial buildings especially upgraded their lighting several years ago, so now they're looking for other projects to do. So we go in and look at the heating systems, building envelope, which is everything that involves insulation, and then also some of the smaller behavioral issues that people have. So like in a manufacturing plant, if you have everybody come in and turn all the machines on all at once, you're going to see spike, your peak charges change, and then so we can go in and just go through the building and recommend, all right, you turn this machine on at this time, 15 minutes later turn this machine on, 15 minutes later turn this machine on. So it's a much more gradual use of the energy in the building, and there's not that spike of everybody going through. And then there's behavioral changes. We literally just recommend that people turn the lights off when they leave the bathroom. You have no idea how much difference.
Is that where that sticker in our bathroom at the monitor came from? Yeah, okay. There
It
you go.
is.
Back in the 70s.
Back in the 70s. Well, so I'll get to you in 1 second. I get to talk for a minute. So the monitor building is your classic example, built 25 years ago, and there's only 2 HVAC systems in the whole, or sections, or whatever the terminology is. And half the building has a press. Yes. And so when the press is running, those guys are roasting. And so what happens is the newsroom becomes about 55 degrees, and all the women are huddled in their blankets as they're trying to write their stories. And why is HVAC so difficult? Has there ever been anybody who's worked in an office that there weren't complaints that it was too hot and too cold and whatever?
I think HVAC is difficult just because systems that were installed a long time ago were very expensive, and HVAC has one of the longest paybacks. So people don't want to upgrade their HVAC systems until it's dead. Until it literally is not working anymore, because it was very expensive to install in the first place. But technology has evolved very quickly in this sector, and you guys can probably talk a little bit more about this, but we're solving a lot of the comfort issues in commercial buildings with heat pumps. And heat pumps in a lot of different places can be individually controlled. So we do a lot of work in New York City with massive commercial and multifamily buildings, and we're noticing tenant comfort has increased a lot with the installation of heat pumps. And up here, they're becoming much more prevalent because the technology has started to evolve to the fact that they can cover temperatures into the negative, which up until fairly recently was not a great
I had a heat pump in the 90s, and it was horrible.
yeah, they've become much better. There's several companies that are doing great R&D on heat pumps right now, and they got to -30, I believe. So that's one of the easiest ways to solve those issues is to install heat pumps.